At this point in time, the Indian Commercial Pilots Association has written to Air India raising concerns over the lack of maintenance of aircrafts operated by the airline. Those are the details that are emerging with regard to Air India. Remember, there has constantly been a lot of issues as far as the airline is concerned. And now this letter has been shot off by pilots talking about how bad the situation is as regards to the airline. Let's in fact go across to Aarti Subramaniam joining us at this point. Aarti, take us through what the details of this letter are. This is yet another instance which highlights just how dire the situation is as far as the airline is concerned.
Yes, Avni, this is a scathing letter written by the Commercial Pilots Association to the Air India management. I'm just going to read some excerpts to you. It is disheartening to note the sorry state of the aircraft operated by Air India and the lack of maintenance for want of spares, planning, coordination and finance. Now, they go on to cite certain instances of aircrafts that have been grounded for want of repairs and for want of spares. Now, some of these figures are really shocking. So, for instance, the Airbus A321 fleet, 40% of that is grounded. That's a whopping 40% of these aircrafts that are grounded for want of spares and repairs. Now, remember, these aircrafts are bought using our money. Taxpayer money is used to buy these aircrafts, and these figures will really shock you. It's not just the Airbus A321. In fact, they go on to cite other Airbus A319 fleet is only slightly better. Out of the 22 aircrafts in this fleet, 4 aircrafts are not operational. Going back to the A321, they say that only 12 out of the 20 aircrafts in this particular fleet are operational. Now, this raises serious questions over the usage and utilization of these resources after spending crores of taxpayer money. This comes, only days after Air India had to delay the payment for its employees for the 5th straight month. So, the financial distress that Air India is in, you have to juxtapose it with this and really ask, what are they doing purchasing all these aircrafts if they're all going to remain grounded or unutilized?
Absolutely, Aarti. Thanks for getting us the details of that particular letter. Let's in fact get some more perspective on this. Vipul Saxena, aviation expert, joining me on the phone line. Thank you very much, Mr. Saxena, for joining us today. What is your response to this letter that has been written and the kind of issues that have been cited, whether you talk about maintenance, whether you talk about spare parts, the fact that so much of the fleet is actually grounded?
Oh, see, I think we'll have to go back, few years back when Air India acquired number of aircraft which were actually not required, and was additional burden on the airlines, for which Mr. Praful Patel and team that time in Mocha are being blamed. From there, this financial mess has started in Air India, and that is showing the cascading effect now when the aircraft are down and there is no money for spares, and very sorry state of the airlines as a whole financial situation. Nothing can be done at this moment to correct this other than financial infusion by the government to rescue these airlines by providing additional funds to get the aircraft in air, because it is very costly to keep the aircraft on ground than keeping in air, because when aircraft is in air, at least it earns revenue, while if the aircraft is on ground, it is a blockage of your finances, as well as that much revenue also stops.
Right.
So I think somebody has to do a financial remodeling or financial study of the airlines completely and unbiasedly, and some funding has to come from government to rescue these airlines. Otherwise, the way things are happening, the situation of airlines is going to be drastically going to be bad to worse in a very short time.
Absolutely, Mr. Saxena. Like you pointed out, more money needs to be pumped in. But then, like Aarti was pointing out, we're talking about pushing in more taxpayer money. And we already know that the plan to sell stake in Air India is something that wasn't taken on. Nobody was interested in buying an airline with this kind of debt on the books. But that aside, Mr. Saxena, that's the financial aspect, which of course needs an entire overhaul. But my other concern is on the safety angle, because here we are talking about this airline. We're talking about questions being raised raised on the maintenance of the aircrafts, questions being raised as far as the spare parts are concerned. What is the kind of maintenance going on? And at the end of the day, it is still operational. There are still thousands of people who are using the airline on a regular basis.
Yeah, I agree with you on this point of passenger safety and how safe the operations of Air India is at this moment. Because if they don't have spares, I'm sure definitely it must be affecting the maintenance of aircraft which are already flying. So I think DGCA must be put to task to do a airworthiness audit of Air India and to see whether they are actually following the maintenance practices which are recommended and the proper maintenance of the aircraft has been done or not. Because that will be able to give a clear picture how things are happening in terms of maintenance of the aircraft. Otherwise, it will be a big safety concern for passengers who are going to fly by Air India.
All right. Thanks, Mr. Saxena, for joining us with your perspective. So there are still a lot of questions that are being raised. One part is, of course, about the entire financial aspect of the airline. And the other part, like we were pointing out, is the entire safety issue. Whether or not this needs another look by the DGCA to check whether the airlines are being maintained properly is something that really should be questioned.